welcome to our GMAT Day 2026 expert panel on how to sequence your GMAT studies. I'm here with three of my very, very favorite people in the GMAT world: Karishma Bansal, ANA prep, tutor, content creator, everything over there, been at it forever, knows her stuff. Erica Tyler John, tutor, GMAT expert at Target Test Prep, and Stacy Koprinz from Manhattan Prep, so director of content and curriculum. So you've got a whole lot of years of experience here. If you are watching live, ask us anything, toss it into that Q&A section of the chat. We will do our best to get to as many questions as we can in 30 minutes. I'm going to start with just the really basic open-ended question. And Erica, how about I pick on you first for no particular reason? Just what basic advice in a couple sentences would you give to somebody who's just starting on the GMAT and says, hey, I need help on all three sections. Where should I start? Should I be doing all three all at the same time? Should I binge on one section? How do I approach that from the beginning?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that I would say is before you even get started on any individual section is just make sure you understand the test as a whole. Make sure you understand what it is doing. I see a lot of people getting into like the nitty gritty of content, being like, oh, I don't understand permutations, without really understanding like the algorithm. How does the test work? How many questions should I be getting wrong? What should I expect from the difficulty level? What should I expect from the exam as a whole? So start there. Start by getting an appreciation for what is the exam, what score are you trying to hit, what is a good goal for you. Start there. Then from there, you're probably going to want to take an initial practice test to get a feel for how you're doing. All right. Maybe you've already done that. And then, okay, if you're getting into the sections, you need help on all three. I would recommend, and this has changed a little bit because the GMAT has changed a little bit. I would recommend starting with Quant and Verbal and saving your data insights for later. And that's not because data insights is less important. It's equally important. They're all weighted equally. But because data insights is kind of a complicated section in that it takes Quant and Verbal foundational skills and it brings them together, and then it puts data interpretation on top of it. It's tough. It's a difficult section, and you're going to have an easier time with it if you have those fundamentals of Quant and Verbal down. So that's what I would say. Start with Quant and Verbal. I like to alternate the two just to keep them both fresh, and then go to data insights once you've got those foundational bits down.
And Krishma, I can see your brain working. What would you add to that?
No, I actually totally agree with what Erica said, that you have to start with Quant and Verbal because data insights, the very basics are formed in Quant and Verbal. So your arithmetic, your number properties, your permutation, combination, everything. And then in critical reasoning, for example, your reductive logic, your conditionals, negation, all those things are the very core of data insight. So typically, I like to tell my students that at least for 3 to 4 weeks, you're focusing on these fundamentals. And when these are done, then start with your data insight fundamentals and start practicing. It is definitely going to take time. Of course, don't start it late because otherwise you'll not get enough practice. You'll not get enough time. And yes, it does take time. Yeah. So something interesting that I read on one of the forums where someone said that data insights is basically Quant and Verbal on steroids, and it just makes so much sense. It is actually that. Yeah. So yes, it'll take time, but don't start right away. But yeah, once your basics are done, then go ahead and start with your practice of DI as well. Totally. Yeah.
Stacy, I'm going to throw a question from an audience member at you. And I realize sometimes it's hard to interpret exactly what might be intended here. So data insights, verbal scores kind of complement each other. Quant's good. And I think by complement, I assume that it's that, yeah, those are a struggle. So tips on that is in that situation where Quant is not an issue for a student, would you suggest a little bit more bouncing back and forth between verbal and data insights? What would you say?
Yeah, so probably you're going to need to do a little bit of diagnosis to figure out what's going on. It's if you're struggling on the verbal side, then it's certainly the case that the verbal-based DI questions are also going to be a struggle. So in that sense, yeah, I'd want you to spend some time really mastering critical reasoning and reading comp, like the fundamentals of the kind of analysis that's going on there to help you with the verbal parts of DI. But I'd also want to check your how you're doing on the math parts of DI, because DI is never purely math or purely verbal. It's a mix of the two. is if your math is strong in the quant section, but are you then struggling with when they stick that into like a math verbal mix of weirdness that they do on the DI section? If that's the case, then there's something to dig into there as well in terms of how do you interpret and understand even the math-based questions. So if you can give us a little more information on that, we can maybe help you dive in a little bit more. But it may be the case also that there's some work to be done on the math-based DI as well, just because verbal is always in the mix on DI.
But what I find interesting about the questions that are starting to pop up, it's a lot of verbal questions now. And let's run with those and see where they take us. Let's see, one here that I saw in a previous session as well about pre-thinking on critical reasoning and reading comp, not working for medium and hard questions. I think what might be interesting here, so you're welcome to comment on that idea of pre-thinking, and that gets interpreted in many different ways. People use that term in different ways. So what exactly do you mean by pre-thinking? Could be a number of different things. But I kind of wonder as we think about people who might be just starting out or sequencing their studies, sometimes people get very into the weeds on very specific techniques, and there are deeper problems with reading or how you process language that might come before everything else. Anyway, whichever you would like to comment on pre-thinking and related topics, go for it. Go for it, Stacey.
So I'll start. I'll give a quick this thing. So pre-thinking essentially means evaluating the argument really well. The way I look at pre-thinking is you break down the argument into its parts and then look at the question stem, and then you already know what you are expecting. Yeah. In case it is about strengthen, then you're just thinking, okay, there could be lots of ways in which I can strengthen the conclusion. Of course, since you are strengthened or weaken or whatever questions, they bring in new information. So you cannot really pre-think. You cannot say, okay, this is what I'm looking at. This is what I need as my answer. So all you should do is you should then move on to the options. Once your argument is evaluated well, you move on to the options and look at whatever supports or weakens, etc. But there are certain question types where I think pre-thinking does help. For example, especially in flaw and reasoning kind of questions, which we do see quite a few like these days. There, if I evaluate my argument really well and I'm looking at, okay, what is the flaw of the argument that the author has presented, then it is easier for me to arrive at the right answer. So where actually I'm pre-thinking for, let's say, 10 to 15 seconds, trying to figure out what is the flaw over here. Yeah, and then I move on to the options. But in most questions, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've seen with my students, pre-thinking is not very helpful, because whenever there's new information, then it is not helpful, because the correct option could give you anything. You could have thought of 10 other things, but the correct option could be an 11th thing. So I think it's a waste of time in case you're investing extra time in pre-thinking per se. But in certain question types, it certainly helps. That would be my take.
And I would echo that. I don't think of pre-thinking as I need to come up with the answer before I look at the answer choices. That's not what you're doing. It's very rare that you actually get that lucky. It's really, I'm setting myself up so that when I do get to the answer choices, it's easier, smoother, faster for me to identify the traps, to pick out the wrong ones from the one right one. That's your goal in pre-thinking. So if you find yourself being like, I need to try to figure out, no, stop right now. You're done with that. What you're trying to do is what Krishna said around, I understand the argument, or I understand the story that the passage is trying to tell. I know what the main points are. I know what the main messaging is, or whatever they asked me about in the specific question. I know if it's an inference that I need to find something that must be true based on the evidence that they've given me so far. I know if I'm weakening, I have to find something that will make the conclusion a little bit less likely to be valid. Like I've got myself in that mindset before I get to the answers. And what that lets you do when you go through the answers is, what I found super effective on verbal is you go through the answers twice. On your first pass through, your only decision is what's wrong. You're not trying to pick the right answer. It's just, I know this one's wrong. I know this one's wrong. I know this one's wrong, because it's too far from what I just set up for myself for in general what I'm going for. So that first pass is super fast. I'm crossing off everything that's wrong. If I'm not sure, it stays in. And then I go back and look. And this is the other beauty about doing this 2-pass thing is if I do that and I still have like 4 answers left, what I know is that I don't know enough about this question. So I should just guess right now from whatever's left and move on. If I'm down to 3 answers, if I'm down to 2 answers, fine. Now I can do a true second pass and really compare those answers, look more specifically for the traps and remind myself, oh, this is a weekend question. And here's the kinds of traps they normally set for weekend to help me evaluate those last couple of tricky answers.
So I'm getting more questions about time management here in Verbal 2 that I think is related to what we were just saying about pre-thinking. I think if I were to summarize what Krishma and Stacy just said, it's okay, if you're thinking pre-thinking as a gimmick where you magically anticipate answers, that's not what you want to do. But if you think of it as a way to think in a systematic way about the passage, that's what's going to develop consistency over time, build you a good, strong foundation. You could say something similar about reading comprehension, obviously different kind of passage. So then as we get into things like time management, so often we see students who say, okay, I need to improve on verbal. And if they're doing what we've already advised, they're doing that before they go too deep into data insights. Okay, so I want to build my foundation on verbal. And you start worrying about time really early on. So how do you deal with that? How do you think about that early, especially early on in your prep? And Herc, I'll pick on you for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tend to do a two-pronged answer here. So first, in terms of timing, when to think about timing in your prep, maybe not right off the bat, because I think if folks are too concerned about timing off the bat, they start building bad habits, and they don't really build the engine that's going to get them to the right answer. They just kind of go at the problem without a good habit, for approaching that problem, and that gets them into trouble later. So save timing for a little bit later until you start to feel like you are building good habits with that problem solving process, until you're starting to get things right, until you're starting to go, okay, I know this question type, I know what I'm doing here, I know this, I do this, okay, and then I take this approach. If this works this way, I go this way. If it works that way, I go that way. Once you're there, then you can go to time management. Prong 2. If you're thinking about time management, the thing that I say the most is to know where your time is best spent, where to invest time and where to save time. And this is kind of the principle of slowing down to speed up. So I find, kind of coming back to that pre-thinking idea, that folks are so focused on the question and the answers that they don't spend the most time thinking about the thing that matters, which is the argument, right? They don't spend time with active reading. They read through it so fast and they go, wait, I don't know what I just read. And they read through it again. I don't know what I just read. They look at their answers. I don't know what I read. And then they read through it again. And they're wasting so much time because they didn't invest it up top. Invest the time in trying to understand the argument. I recommend stopping at every piece of punctuation. Stop with every new piece of information. Go, what did I just read? How does it connect to the other things I just read? And then you'll find by the time, okay, now I'm going through my answer choices, that you do have that foundation. And then you can do what Stacy said, take those passes through the answers to then decide, should I invest in this problem, or should I just make a guess and move on because it's not serving me overall? So that's what I would say with time management. Don't do it right away. And then when you do it, know where to focus.
I'm getting a really broad question here that I kind of love. Kenzie, great to see you again. I've seen you in 2 panels in a row. Makes me happy. Realistic improvements in Quant and DI. Let's add verbal to that mix too, because plenty of people need work on that. And planning prep. But what's realistic? I think if you're just starting out and going, and you're watching a panel on how to sequence your studies, and you're going, well, hey, where do I start? Okay, in 2 or 3 months, what can you accomplish? I think when you just start, it's just a number. Hey, I'm at a 525 and I want a 705. Can I do that in 2 or 3 months? How do you think about that?
Yeah, okay. So it really depends on where you are right now. It really depends on what your quant skills are right now. And more than your quant skills, more than your verbal skills, I think it also depends on what your reasoning skills are right now. And that is something which I think we build over years during our education. And, there are people to whom I would say, okay, you know what, go ahead, practice for 15 days and go, you'll hit a 705 plus. I mean, I'm like 90% sure that you will, yeah. Then there are others who are going to take at least 3 to 4 months or more. So, and it may not really have much to do with their quant skills and verbal skills, it may also have a lot to do with their reasoning skills. So what can be achieved in 2 to 3 months really depends on where you are right now. Let's say in case you are strong in logic, you're strong in reasoning, then I would say 2 to 3 months are great to go through the complete quant curriculum, and that will improve your DI a lot as well. Of course, you'll need to practice a little bit of DI side by side as well, and you could see a large improvement in your score. But in case you realize that your logic and your reasoning is not very strong, that is something, and by the way, it's nobody's fault. Yeah, it is about the exposure that you get in your formative years and during your education and all. It depends on the courses you happen to take, etc. Yeah. So, but in case though that logic is not developed in those years, then it is going to take more time to develop it now. So then just going through a quant curriculum may not be sufficient. It will take more time. You will need to, because look, GMAT is not a test of knowledge. As we know, it is a test of logic and reasoning. So even if I know all the math formulae and I know how things work, etc., I still may not be able to apply them when I get those questions on the test. So that is why it could lead to a lot of improvement for some people, but it could take a whole lot more time for others. It really does depend on where I start. Yeah, where I am currently. That would be my take on this. Yeah.
I'll add something slightly cruel to the mix. So the average person who retakes the GMAT, so this is stats from GMAT, makers of the GMAT. The average person who retakes the exam improves by 30 points on average. That's it.
Yeah.
Now you can pick that number apart and say, well, how hard did those people study on average? And there's data on that. It's not necessarily a ton of hours, and maybe not studying the right way. So lots of asterisks there. I'm not saying that an improvement larger than 30 points is impossible by any means. I'm just saying that it doesn't happen as often as we would like. So if you're thinking about what's realistic in 2 to 3 months, I'm not saying that the answer is 30 points. I'm saying that if you're looking for a really huge improvement, 100 points plus, 2 to 3 months is really aggressive for that type of improvement, depending on what's going on.
Yes, it's quite ambitious. Yeah.
Okay, so seeing lots of questions coming in. Keep tossing the questions, and I'll get to as many as we can in the next 13 minutes. So I'm getting some people were kind of asking some of the general questions about kind of answering the title of this panel. So how to sequence your studies. I think all four of us were in agreement. Look, if you have some weaknesses on quant and verbal, you want to build that foundation first. Verbal in particular, it's finding a process that works for you, ditching some of the gimmicks. So that's the overall kind of broad answer to the question. Then from there, depending on what you need, the answer might be different as far as how you should invest. Weak at quant, maybe you're spending more time on quant. Now we're getting some questions about data insights in particular that I think are interesting around time management. And all of us are nodding grimly, even if we're not actually nodding our heads. Data insights is a time-consuming section, especially MSR and table analysis, even if it's not necessarily hard. Brilliant job, Mohammed, of capturing what most people feel. Data insights is painfully time-pressured for the vast majority of people, unless you are a bizarro freak of nature who can do this super quickly. I feel time pressure when I take it. So Stacey, I guess I'll pick on you here because I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. Thoughts on data insights as time-consuming and what to do about it?
So first of all, I absolutely agree. This is the section that I have the most time pressure myself on. I'm always working right to the very last second that they give me in this section because there is just so much information. A couple of things. So one is I've got to remind myself, and I want to remind you, that the goal is not to get everything right. The goal is to get some stuff wrong fast so that you then have more time to spend on other things. And that's especially true in the data insight section compared to the other ones. If you go and look at the score reports from either official exams or official practice exams, you can see that you can get more wrong on the data insight section and still get a stronger score compared to the other sections. So you have more leeway there to just bail on some things and move on. That's part of it. The other part of it is as you're getting ready for this section, data insights was specifically built to mimic the real world work, real world case studies, where we are getting inundated with information every second of the day. Right now, you're getting inundated with information in this panel. And you have to figure out how, like, what are the 3 pieces of information I need from this like 8 paragraphs of information that I just gave me. So part of what you're doing in your studies is the opposite of what we're used to doing in school. You're used to like reading everything very carefully and knowing all the facts and understanding. And this is like triage mode. I need to really quickly just look at, what did you give me big picture? What are the, like, this information's here on this tab and whatever. And then I need to immediately go, okay, what question is my boss asking me to answer right now, so that I can go find the like 1 or 2 pieces of information that I actually need to understand to answer that question. So it's just a completely different mindset that it's part of your training to get ready for this section. If you can do that, and you can also like emotionally understand it's okay for me to get stuff wrong, and actually I want to get stuff wrong fast, then you're still going to have time pressure in the section, but you're going to get through it and get a good score.
A follow-up question I think is related. So is it bad practice to not watch the clock continuously and answer questions at your own pace, assuming that your speed is good enough? So Eric, I might pick on you with that one. So what would you say to this?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about in the test environment, like not in your practice. If you're talking in your practice, yeah, practice on time, that's great. But if you're talking in the test environment, I mean, I think you've hit on something really important, in that I think too many people are watching the clock all the time, and that is not helpful. It's time you're looking at the clock is time you're not working on the problem at hand. Time you're looking at the clock is time that you're distracting yourself from the flow state that you're in with that problem. So you shouldn't be looking at the clock all the time. If you are generally good at managing time, I think that's great. I think that's something that we all want to develop as we are working on our skill set for this test, is to get your internal clock going, to figure out, I'm spending too long on this, I need to move on, I need to dump this problem, or I can invest here. I do recommend checking in every so often. This is advice I've given for years and years, is to find a number of questions at which you're just gonna check in at the clock, and where you should be around that point. And have those little benchmarks so that you can just check in. Okay, I'm at question 5. Boop. Okay, I'm doing all right. Continue on. Or, oh, boop, I'm a little ahead. Great. I can maybe slow my roll a little bit. Or, ooh, I'm actually a little bit behind. Maybe I need to start thinking about making some sacrifices a little earlier, just to kind of make sure that you are thinking about that. But if you're on track, you don't need to be looking at every single problem. Use your internal clock.
And I think perfect world, as you get to a good pace, so as you learn to let go of things on data insights, to Stacy's point, or quant for that matter, and you become nice and systematic on everything. Verbal, you're on average taking about the same amount of time over the course of a section. You won't need to look at the clock. So a lot of good time management comes from developing really good processes, getting comfortable, being systematic, being wildly consistent as you practice. And then, yeah, you can and should almost ignore the clock at that point. Okay, really good question here. I love this. And so apologies, guys, we can't get to all of them. Got about 7 minutes left here. This poor person, and we have all seen so many people in this situation so often over our teaching careers, burnt out. Now what? And I suppose we could take this in 2 different parts. I think for the people who are looking at this, who are early in their studies, how do you avoid the burnout to begin with? And second, once you do get burnt out, what do you do? So whichever you want us to take this, go ahead and go for it.
And then we all waited, and then we all jumped in.
Friends being too polite. Good, Stacy.
Well, Krishma is one who hasn't talked the most recently, so let's let her go first.
Good. You're muted, Krishma.
Yeah, all right. So first of all, burnout happens in case we feel that we're not making progress. Yeah, and that happens in case we're just practicing questions blindly, in case one after the other. There are no takeaways. There is no progress that I can see on the report where I say, okay, if I feel that I'm making progress, then I don't burn out. Then I know that I'm going to reaching the level where I want to reach. So my first advice always is that, first of all, figure out, of course, where you are, and take some diagnostic questions, see how you feel about them. And in case you feel that you are conceptually not very strong, then first go through concepts first understand exactly what a topic is. Let's say if I'm talking about percentages, there is a lot. Percentages is not 10% of something. It's just not that. There are a million other things that are relevant in percentages. Yeah, go through the entire topic. Similarly, go through all the topics. Once you are done with this, then whenever you are practicing questions, you're going to make progress, because you know the basics very well. Now you are building on those basics with every practice session that you are taking. When you take a practice session, write down your takeaways. Say that, okay, I got this question right, and this is what I learned from it. That it can also be written as this. So for example, my profit percent doesn't need the number of articles or whatever, and write that down. When you see that takeaway list growing, when you see that you are learning from these practice questions, then you see progress happening. Your scores also start improving. Of course, it takes time, and as we talked about before, that your logic and reasoning also develop side by side. So in that case, then burnout doesn't happen. Then you feel excited, in fact, about the next practice session. Now, in case people have hit that level where they just don't feel like looking at a GMAT book, etc., then I just tell them to take a week off. It's all right. Don't think about GMAT. Just try and calm yourself. Just do things that you like to do, and then come back refreshed. Then look at the things that you're not very comfortable with. Fix those gaps first, then start practicing again. So typically, a break is required in case a person has already hit a burnout. And after that, people are able to recover, in most cases.
Erica, Stacey, other thoughts on burnout?
Yeah, I had one other thought on avoiding burnout, less to do with, the actual content of the study and more to do with the structure of the study. I find that, people live busy lives, right? And with GMAT prep, a lot of people think, okay, more is more. Whenever I have time, I'm just going to do it. And then they try to do it wherever they can fit it in. And it either leads to not prepping enough because it just doesn't become a priority, or prepping way too much and prepping in kind of a scattered way that leads to less progress, but also to that feeling of burnout. So my best recommendation, and this should happen at the beginning of your prep, is decide on your approach and schedule it. Make appointments with yourself for, this is when I'm going to have my study blocks. This is when I'm going to do my practice tests. Put it on your calendar and then treat it like an appointment. That's when you do it. That's just what's happening, right? That's life now, is as you're studying for this test. It's not forever. It's as long as you're studying for this test. And then follow that. And that helps, with not feeling like, oh, I'm not doing what I should be doing. It helps with increasing the quality of your study, and it helps with reducing that burnout. And if you find that it is too much, you have overcommitted yourself, pare it back, or take a little bit of time off. But my best recommendation is schedule it, and you won't find yourself in that situation where the time is consuming you and it's not going anywhere.
I'll add to the calendar project. Erica, I do the same thing. I love that. You give yourself at least one day a week where you don't do anything GMAT related anyway. That's one of the best ways to avoid burnout, is to be giving yourselves those little complete breaks, mini breaks as you go. I also would not recommend studying more than 3 hours in one day. I know some people are studying full time. I don't think there's actually an advantage to studying 6 to 8 hours a day. Your brain can only learn so much in a day before it's done. And that time is more like 2 to 3 hours, not like 6 hours. So it's actually better to spread it out than to try to cram it all in a month.
Okay, we've got about a minute left. Thank you so much for this, such a sweet comment. So glad to put us all here. I'm actually excited too. There's 3 of my favorite people, so wonderful to get everybody in the same room. Thank you for the really kind comment. Last very quick one that popped up here that I think is worth a few seconds of our time. Kind of on the burnout. I know we just talked about it a whole bunch, but what I find interesting about this, I think this is somebody different than asked the original question. During a gap year, the quick wisecrack I'd make here is, I think you're more likely to get burnt out when you have a gap year and you are focused solely on the GMAT, maybe on your applications as well, because you wake up in the morning, you're thinking about the GMAT. You take a lunch break, you feel bad because you're not studying for the GMAT, and then you're thinking about the GMAT while you're doing everything. And I love what Erica and Stacey are saying about Yeah, stick it in your calendar. Your job is to go do 3, maybe 4. I wouldn't go past that even in a gap year, hours a day, and be done. Wake up, put in your 4 hours, take some breaks in there. That's it. Okay. Any last wisecracks? Anybody in 30 seconds or less?
Just good luck. Good luck.
Try to enjoy it. Find balance in your lives. Don't kill yourself over this. Pace yourself.
Find the fun in GMAT. You'll enjoy your preparation a whole lot more.
It's a limited time. It's a limited time.
I love it. All right. Erica, Karishma, Stacy, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll hopefully see you in the tutor booths.
Thank you, Charles.
Bye,
Bye to
everyone.
everyone.